everyone, we're back with a new article that shows us some more rules for the new upcoming Warhammer The Old World. The Old World Almanac, the movement phase. We get marching columns introduced. That's their main take for this article. What marching columns are, we will find out in a little while. So here we open with this image of a lot of Bretonnian knights. I'm not quite sure because I don't own the box set for the 6th edition Knights, but this might have been the box art cover for the 6th edition Warhammer Bretonnia Knights that is just being reused. I know that we will see one later that is definitely reused. In the last article, we got to learn about the turn sequence and about the different phases. And then they said the movement phase will be subdivided into 4 phases. Before we dive into what these 4 sub-phases are for the movement phase, we'll take a look at formation. There are 4 different types of formation that we can see here. We get open order and close order. That's basically just your rank and file, your blocks. We get skirmish. That's also something that's familiar, a loose formation. And the special formation for the Bretonnians, the lance formation, as has been remarked many times before. This is the classic 5th edition lance, not the 6th edition 3 by long column. So a lot better looking, in my opinion, than the 6th edition lance. Most units will be arrayed in close order. That's base-to-base contact, facing the same direction, and basically what a unit of Warhammer troops is usually doing. Then there is a small caveat because your unit has 2 different types. That's combat order and marching column. If you have a unit in combat order, that means that you have to be wider than it is deep. So here you see a 5x3 unit of infantry that is in combat order, but if you turn every model in the unit and you have, in this case, a 4x5, then you have a marching column, which is deeper than it is wide. Marching columns cannot fight, or at least they cannot charge, so there's no longer the bus, the Skaven slave bus and the Ogre gut bus and things like that you had in 8th edition that were really powerful. You don't have that anymore. If you are in a marching column, you are on a march, and that has the advantage that you can move up to 3 times your movement when you are marching instead of just the normal 2 times your movement. Skirmisher units, they do not need to rank up at all, so long as each model is within an inch of at least one of its comrades. That's still the same. And then we also get open order. That's a new one. They still fight in ranks, but they're faster, more agile, and handle tough terrain better. So it doesn't really say here how that will work out, but I'm assuming that will be something like units of dryads moving through woods. They can move through the terrain without penalty, even though they are still in that block formation. Then we get our first look at the actual movement phase itself, as mentioned before, divided into 4 parts. The first one is declare charges. Lovely bit of Bretonnia artwork here, by the way. Not one that I immediately recognize. Might be one from earlier. Might also be a new one. It does have a bit of the 6th or 7th edition style about it, but I don't recognize it from the 6th or 7th edition rulebooks. First you get to declare charges, which is still the same. Charging is the only way to enter combat. It has been that since 1st edition. And then, of course, you have to be in the front arc, visible. Your unit cannot be fleeing. You cannot have rallied this turn or already engaged in combat. But, and that is something that was carried over from 8th edition, you may pre-measure the distance to your targets. Then you get your charge reactions. Most units may hold to receive the charge, stand and shoot if they have a missile weapon, and you can flee, which is turning around and trying to escape, but if you're caught you will be run down and destroyed. That is still the same. And then we get an old rule that was around in 1st edition and also in some parts in later editions. For example, there's a Bretonnia Virtue in 5th edition that allows you to countercharge. What that is exactly will depend on the rules, but I believe in both 1st and 5th edition, the 2 instances that I came across countercharge, you move 4 inches or maybe up to your movement value towards the unit, and then both sides count as charges and both have their charge bonuses, and then you handle the combat in initiative. We don't know yet if charges get to strike first, as it was in basically all editions up to 8, or if the chargers, well, not in 1st edition too. So maybe from 2nd to 7th edition, and then in 8th edition it went all by initiative order, and charging just gave you a bonus to your combat results. Then you move your charges, and that is works, I believe, the same way as it is in 8th edition. You roll 2 dice, you pick the highest score, and then you add that to your movement. So it gives you an example here: a unit of skeleton warriors, which has a movement of 4. It doesn't say it, but you can deduce it. It has a range of between 5 and 10 inches. Bretonnia Knights are an exception. They have the Swift Stride special rule, which I believe is basically what every unit has if it has a movement of 7 or more. So basically all cavalry and some monsters. And that means that you add an extra d6 to every charge they make. I'm not sure if this is going to be the same as it was in 8th edition, which was roll 3d6 and pick the 2 highest, or if this is going to be you still roll 2d6, pick the highest, and then add an extra d6 to your charge. Then if you're in range, accounting for wheeling, and I will get to those little asterisks later, it means that you deduct your wheeling from the charge, that's what it says. You move your charges into base contact, and then bring the maximum models from both sides in contact. That's also still the same. If you whiff the roll, so if you don't make the charge, then you must move the full distance rolled towards the target. Not sure how they mean this. I believe in 8th edition it is that you just move the highest die towards your target, and it might mean the same thing here. So if you have a movement of 4 and you add 3, you roll 3, and then you are 8 inches away, then you just move 3 inches ahead. But yeah, that might be that they mean that, or I don't assume that they mean just pick the 2 highest dice, pick 2 of the dice and then go ahead and move that distance. Another piece of artwork. This one is definitely familiar. I remember this fanatic. Not sure where I saw it. Might be in the Orc and Goblin Army book. Might also be somewhere in the 6th edition rulebook. But this is definitely an old picture that we see here again. Then the third step, the third subphase, is compulsory moves. This is mostly fleeing units, but also other things of random movements, such as Night Goblin Fanatics or Stone Trolls who have failed their stupidity test. That's obviously still going to be the same. And then we get the remaining moves, which is a bit more interesting, because you can do a lot more things here than with charging. With charging you can only have your wheel. Doesn't say anything about the second wheel, the closing the door, but that might still mean a free wheel. Wheeling still works the same. We can go over this really quickly. At first I had a bit of a problem interpreting the picture because I thought they were starting to wheel from the back, but you have to start at the bottom and then the knights move up towards the top of the picture. Other maneuvers are turn. You can turn 90 or 180 degrees, spending a quarter of your move for each 90 degrees. That was in some of the older editions. Then they changed it to be you spend a quarter of your move, regardless of how much you turn. You can also move backwards or sidestep at half pace. That's basically what you could do back then. You turn, you move half your move, and then you turn back. So they incorporated that into these rules. A bit redundant, but maybe some people wouldn't have guessed that they could do that when you turn and turn back. And now, of course, since spending half of your turn, half of your movement phase for a 180-degree turn, you cannot move backwards anymore in the same way that you could before. Redress ranks or reform, I am guessing that these are still the same as what they were. What happens after the charge? A lot of angry jostling and sharpened metal, which will work out in another article. Next time, and assuming since these two articles are 1 week apart, next week we get the shooting phase. Here we see a image of the Bretonnian archers that were on the front of the 6th edition box set. And yeah, that is basically going to be it. This is one part I skipped over. If you want to do something in the remaining movement phase, you can choose to move or march. And if you march, you can only wheel. But if you march and you are in that marching column in this deeper than wide formation, you can move up to 3 times your movement range, movement speed, which is really a lot for cavalry, and even infantry can get into combat a lot quicker. But then you would have to spend the next turn reforming or redressing your ranks, which will probably also take up a bit of your movement. So we still need to learn how this works. One question I immediately had when I saw this: what if you have a square formation? What if you have not, in this case, the marching column, a 4x5, but if you have a 4x4 formation? Do you then say this now is a marching column when I want to march it, and it is in combat order when I want to charge it, without having to reform in between? Not sure if you can do that, but if you can, then I expect we will see a lot more of square formations. The rules will probably clarify that at some point. So yeah, pre-measuring, not a big fan of that. I started in 6th edition when there was no pre-measuring, and that really helped me to learn how to guess ranges. 8th edition, even though you can pre-measure, I always keep forgetting that you add 86 to your charge, and that it's if I'm 9 inches away from the opponent with a movement of 4, I can still get charged. Other than that, this is basically, I guess, what they promised: a rehash of some old rules, adding some new things and taking things from different editions. Countercharge, having that reintroduced, is a nice touch. Yeah, I hope we will see a lot more of these touches. So far, I think this is just looking and feeling like what you would expect from a game of Warhammer in just the next edition after 8, where they took some things from previous editions, added some new things, clarified some things, fixed some things that were broken. And yeah, that I think is basically what we can expect. So the old world, they do present it as a different game. This is not going to be the 9th edition of Warhammer Fantasy. They do present it as an entirely different game. But so far, I think they've done a very good job at making just Warhammer Fantasy 9th edition, picking up where the rules left off after 8th edition. I'm really curious to see what they will do with the rank bonus. If you need to have 5 or 4 models in a rank, the formations that we see here are 5 wide when they are in combat order. That leads me to expect that we will have ranks of 5 and no longer ranks of 4 as we had up until 6th edition. Up to and including 6th edition, I should say. But I guess we will just have to wait and see. Wait until we get to the combat section, which will probably be in 2 weeks if the pace of these keep up. That's going to be it for this video. Like the video if you like the video. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content like this. If you want to learn a bit more about countercharging and where we encountered it in 1st edition, I can invite you to take a look at the Ziggurat of Doom battle report, where countercharging was a thing. There's a 1st edition battle report. Or you can also take a look at the podcast Forces of Fantasy. You can find the Forces of Fantasy podcast on any of your regular podcast hosting platforms. And there we take a look at all of the editions from Warhammer Fantasy 1st edition all the way up to and including 8th edition. And of course we will talk about all the old world news that we're getting in the meantime as well. Let me close off by mentioning the Forces of Fantasy Patreon. Forces of Fantasy Patreon is non-tiered. If you want to have some exclusive bonus content, some votes about what battle reports to do, and some upcoming news and looks at things that we are going to do on the Forces of Fantasy podcast, take a look at the Forces of Fantasy Patreon. Patreon.com/forcesoffantasy. The Forces of Fantasy Patreon is non-tiered. You can join for as little or as much as you like. That's going to be it for this video. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you on the next Old World update.